The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is Kim Brown speaking. The video that you're seeing on your screen is actually our presenter, Susan Bashinsky, and we will hear from her in just a few minutes. Again, welcome. I am Kim Brown with the Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities, Transition and Employment Projects, and the Montana Deaf-Blind Project, and Teresa Baldry and I will be your moderators for today. Live captioning is available for the session, and in order to access the captions, open the captioning link that you should see on the slide in front of you, and it's also posted in the chat box. If you're not able to see the chat box on your screen, go to the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You'll see an orange box with a white arrow in it. If you click on that, a drop box will open, and one of the options on there is chat or questions. The link to the captions is in that box. When you open the caption link in a separate browser, then you can adjust that frame. It's helpful to put that frame toward the bottom of your screen because the captions scroll up, and that way you will be able to see the slideshow and also our presenter, Susan. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Montana Deaf-Blind Project, which is funded in whole or in part by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, and through a contract with Children's Special Health Services at the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. The statements shared in the presentation do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the sponsoring departments. All attendees are currently muted to cut down on background noise so everyone can hear the presentation. If you want to ask our presenter a question or make a comment, please type your question or comment into the chat box. And please note that only you, the moderators, and the presenter will be able to see what you have typed into that box. For those of you who requested Montana Office of Public Instruction renewal units when you registered, we'll email those to you after the webinar, and that can take up to a couple of weeks for us to get those sent out. You do have to have pre-registered and requested the OPI credit in order to receive it. We do send a certificate of attendance, and the link to that will be included in the follow-up email that you should receive from GoToWebinar tomorrow. Today's session is being recorded for the Montana Deaf-Blind Project and Transition and Employment Projects resource libraries. And by participating in the webinar, you grant permission for any chats and/or questions that you submit through the webinar platform to be recorded. The video for today's webinar will be posted to our training archives pages, and I'll put both of the website addresses or URLs for those archive pages in the chat box later today while our presenter is speaking. The handouts for today's session are already available on both of those websites, or you can download them right from the GoToWebinar site. If you go up again to that orange box with the white arrow in it that's at the upper right-hand corner of your screen and click on that. When it opens, one of the options on your drop-down menu says Handouts. And if you click on that, you should be able to download the handouts that our presenter has provided for today. There are 3 handouts as well as the slide deck for today's presentation. I'll put the evaluation link in the chat box later during the webinar, and that link will also be in a follow-up email that you receive from GoToWebinar about an hour after today's session ends. We just have, I think, 8 questions in that evaluation, and we ask that you please take the time to answer those questions for us. We share that information with the presenter and with our whole team, and we use that information to continue to improve the training that we're offering you, and also to help decide on topics that you would like us to find presentations on or develop presentations on for the future. So again, please take the time to complete that evaluation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the Montana Deaf-Blind Project co-director, Ellen Condon, for a few words about the project. Ellen?
Thanks, Kim. And just to share with you what the Montana Deaf-Blind Project is, like Kim said, we're federally funded. We're one of 54 state or multi-state projects across the country. and we're based at the University of Montana's Rural Institute. The Deafblind Project, we focus on kids with a combined vision and hearing loss, and we provide technical assistance and work to build capacity and infrastructure so students with the dual sensory loss are identified early, they receive educational accommodations, and they have support to transition into adulthood. So we also are responsible for reporting specific information about students with dual sensory loss to the feds every year, just like all the other state projects are. So part of what Teresa Baldry has been very active at is collecting information for our state census. Each year we have between 40 and 50 kids usually identified as having a dual sensory loss, but we know we are we're still missing several. So we're hoping that the information that Susan has shared about a dual sensory loss, what it might look like, how diverse these learners are, will help folks identify and refer a student to the project so that we can get information to their educational team and family. So if you're looking for more information or want to reach us, the information's on this slide. Go ahead and call us or email us, or please visit our website because we have a lot of great information there. So thank you, Kim.
Great, thank you, Ellen. And with that, I would like to go ahead and introduce our speaker. We are delighted to have her back for the third time in a row. We have Dr. Susan M. Bashinsky, who is a professor of special education and is currently serving as the interim dean of the Missouri Western State University Graduate School. She has more than 40 years experience working with learners who experience multiple disabilities, including deaf-blindness and charge syndrome. And no, Susan, I am not suggesting you're old. You've said that during the last 2 webinars. That's not what I'm saying. Throughout her career, Susan's research interests and areas of expertise include early communication, gestural communication and language development, augmentative communication, and cochlear implants for learners who experience deaf-blindness. With that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Kim. You called me out on that one, didn't you? So, okay. A couple of just general comments from me. Thank you to all of you participants who've chosen to take an hour and a half out of your super busy days. I know this year has been a super challenging time for teachers and educators and people who work in school districts, and you could have spent your time a lot of other ways. So we're grateful. Thank you for your participation. One more time, I want to thank Kim and Teresa and Ellen for offering me this opportunity, and I want to thank the captioner who is making it possible to make this content as accessible as possible. This is really a treat for me. If you have participated in one or both of the previous webinars, thanks for coming back. If you haven't, welcome. For those of you who have been with me one of the other times, you're going to have the answer to the first poll question right now. If you would launch that for me, Kim. I just really like to know who it is with whom I'm speaking today. So I just want to know who's here. And you may select one or more of the following. If you're a parent, guardian, or close family member, if you're a paraeducator, if you're some brand of teacher, TVI, deaf educator, general ed, special ed teacher, if you're a related service provider, if you're an administrator who serves in any role, or if you serve some other role for working with learners who experience deaf-blindness, or whom you might think experience deaf-blindness, you could stick that in the chat for us, please. And I'll try to keep that in mind as we talk.
Susan, this is Kim. We have about 71% of the audience members who have voted. or who have given their answer. So we will wait another 10 seconds and I will close the poll and share the results.
Thanks, Kim.
And this is Teresa. We have a couple in the comments. Just as marking other, we have a family to family health information center person with the Rural Institute. We also have our project officer, Rebecca Sheffield, online, and she's happy to be here for us, as well as a resource navigator with the Family to Family Project, the Montana State Parent Training and Information Center. And we have a visitor from the North Carolina Deafblind Project.
Interesting. Probably somebody with whom I worked when I was in North Carolina. So welcome to all of you. I'm really excited that so many folks associated with other aspects of services in the state of Montana have joined us today. I'm limited by the number of options I can put, and it looks like I really blew it with the things I picked. We've got 38% of other people. I wasn't trying to neglect you. Teresa, thank you for informing me of that. I'm glad all of you are here. This is great for me to read. And I am personally quite excited because the fact we have 17% of our attendees are family folks, parents and family folks. That's the highest we've had of the 3 webinars. So yay. Thank you for being here. Thanks to all of you for joining us. We will go ahead and let me show you the agenda that we have for today. Generally speaking, I am asking that you please try to remember the vision and hearing reminders that we discussed and that were available as handouts from webinar number 2. If you weren't able to grab those because you didn't join us, that's fine, but those are archived on the Montana Deafblind Project site, and I personally think they're foundational to what we're talking about today. So please try to remember those things. We are going to focus on the unique learning needs. This is where we get down to some, so what do I do, Susan? For the last 2 times, you've been telling me about kids who may qualify for a label of deafblindness. You've been telling us about those needs and what we need to remember about vision and about hearing and all these things. So what? What am I going to do to be a more effective parent, a more effective supervisor, a more effective service provider? That's today, okay? So we're going to talk about the learner's unique needs. We're going to talk about communication reminders. You say she's boring, she uses the same thing all the time. Vision reminders, hearing reminders, communication reminders. These are just my way of trying to summarize for you what I think are the most important points of the content we'll be discussing together. Then we're going to talk about teaching and interaction strategies for improving instruction, in particular utilizing routines. Montana Deafblind Project staff asked me to specifically address routines, and then there's like a super duper quick summary of kind of this webinar, but all 3 of them. So here we go. Same. There is an action planning sheet in the handouts. It's the same one as before. So if you've used one before, that's awesome. Pull it back out. My goal in this, and I'm giving away how I learn, but I know that if I hear something in a lecture or in a webinar, and I think, Susan, that would be a really good idea, you need to do this. If I don't write it down, even the best of my intentions, it's gone. So you have an action planning sheet. Maybe it'd be better to call it a notes sheet. I don't know. But if there's something you want to remember to tell your child's teacher, if you as a parent want to remember to tell a respite care provider, if you as a supervisor want to remember to tell some of your staff something that you hear today, just jot that down on the action planning sheet and make yourself a note by when you hope to accomplish it, because goal setting helps us all, I believe. So here we go. Unique learning needs. Let's go. Partnering or teaching a learner who experiences deafblindness. What does it involve? I've said this before, but I think as we talk about teaching strategies, it is worth saying again. I can't claim it. It is not my quote, but I love it. It's inviting the child or inviting the adolescent out of her own body to join you in the world. Because kids who don't hear very well or at all, don't see very well or at all, they're very internalized. They may not be aware for quite a while that there's a world out there with people and things, and that this out here is part of their own body. So we invite them out to join us, because they have to join us in the world if we're going to build connections with that learner. And so before we go on, Kim, if you would launch the second poll for me. This is more like a pre-test today. Haven't had a pre-test before, so we need a pre-test. And the question is, I want you please to choose one best answer. Which of the following is often cited, and I mean in the literature, in the special ed literature, as the single biggest barrier to ultimate success for a learner who experiences deaf-blindness? Is it a loss of visual skill? Is it a loss of auditory skill? Is it a lack of conventional communication skill? Or is it cognitive or intellectual disability? Choose one. Is it because of vision, hearing, communication, or intellectual capacity? What do you think it is? And I'm loving the answers I'm seeing.
Well, these answers came in quickly, Susan. This is Kim. I think we'll just give another 5 seconds or so, because lots of people have voted.
They have. I'm good with that. There it is. I'm sorry, I was looking down. Look at that. Look at that. The answer that's borne out in the special ed literature is what is highlighted in blue, and 92% of you nailed it. It's communication. And if you listen to what Kim was reading when she's talking about what I love to do, there was a clue in there, because almost everything I do is associated with communication. But that's not why this is the correct answer. This is the correct answer because that's what the SPED literature says. Those of you who did say vision or intellectual disability, you are correct in that certainly a loss of visual skill or a loss of intellectual disability does impact success and does impact a learner's progress, but certainly not to the same degree or magnitude that inexperience with communication does. So thank you, Kim. So with that being said, partnering or teaching a learner who experiences deaf-blindness. Most families and teachers, when they're asked that question I just asked of all of you, they answer communication, communication, communication. In the Charge Syndrome book that was recently published in its 2nd edition, that's the first sentence in the book, is what is the biggest need for kids with deaf-blindness who have Charge Syndrome? Communication, communication, communication. And this is something that really is foundational to everything we'll talk about today. Come on, baby, move. There we go. And I would suggest to you that there is a difference in these 2 points on your screen right now. It's not only that all learners can learn to communicate, which some people say. I believe that all learners do communicate. Every kid right now, where he or she is in his point in development, that kid is communicating with us. May not be in a way we understand, may not be in a way we expect, but those challenging behaviors, those unusual self-stim behaviors, whatever it is, that's communication. And the onus is on us to figure out the meaning. We have to become interpreters to get what that kid is saying to us. And I would also say that all learners, absolutely every single learner's communication skills can be improved. And I say, or in parentheses, or altered. And some of you might say, why do you say or altered? Why don't you say that every kid's communication skills can be improved? I'll tell you why. There are certain syndromes that do impact learners with deaf-blindness. Let's use an extreme example. I mentioned it last time, Batten syndrome. That is a progressive illness. And over time, a learner with Batten's disease loses skill. And hopefully if a teaching team and a family are doing what they need to do for that learner, they're changing up how they enable that learner to communicate. So you're making changes even as the child is losing ability, is losing symbolic ability, is losing motor ability, is losing speech ability. So that's why I didn't say that everybody's can be improved, all right? So one of my favorite things is to talk about communication reminders. This is a handout you have available in the section to which Kim and Ellen have directed you. There are 18 of these. I could do 3 hours on these 18 slides. So some of them are going to go pretty quickly because you're smart people and you can read, and you've already demonstrated that you have a genuine appreciation for how important communication is to learners who experience deaf-blindness. So we're going to go through them fairly quickly. I will stop and pause for a few of them that I think deserve some extra comment. So here we go. I will tell you, you have these same 18 on your handout sheet. They're not in the same order, okay? They're not in the same order, but they're all there. So you have the same content. Saying what I said before, just in another way, gives you a clue. I think it's important, right? Everybody communicates. Everybody does, all right? Language is just one way we communicate. Spoken language, sign language, those are just two examples of modes or means through which we communicate with one another. Our learners with deaf-blindness, and I'm probably not telling any of you something you don't know, they use all kinds of things to communicate with us. They use their body movement, they use their facial expression. If you work with a child whose primary way to receive information is through sign language, and you're trying to teach them and they do this, they're communicating with you, right? That's one thing that is just like, wah! You know, they basically are saying, Susan, shut up, or Susan, I'm too tired, Susan, I don't want to listen to you right now. And you can't take the kid's eyelids open, right? But they're communicating with you. And I think one of the most important things that we, parents, teachers, supervisors, whoever you are, we need to expect that every learner with deaf-blindness is communicating with us. Again, it's our responsibility to figure it out. That's not that kid's responsibility. He or she is doing the best she can do. And we got to figure it out. We got to organize it. We got to make it systematic. We need to observe. We need to observe those subtle signals that kids send. A kid who might be in a sideline position, if you watch carefully enough, every time a certain person, or anybody, every time anybody walks by, she kicks her right foot. She kicks her right foot. If you see that over time and you observe a pattern, it could be that's a communication behavior when somebody walks past her visual or walks through her visual field to say, hey, I'm over here. Come over here and interact with me. Come over here and talk to me. Or come over here, I hurt. You need to move me. But it could be that's a communication signal. We need to watch. We need to focus. We need to be attuned to the learner. And I don't think any of you, I'm not saying what I'm going to say next because I think you are violators of this, but I think you have observed it at some point in schools. I know I have, where maybe learners with deaf-blindness or other multiple disabilities are being fed because they can't feed themselves. or they can't totally feed themselves to get enough nutrition, so they're being fed. And this one person who's feeding Billy Bob is sitting next to a person over here who's feeding Mary, and while the person feeding Billy Bob gives him a spoon, she's talking to Mary about, did you watch a game last night? What are you going to do this weekend? And it's like, no, that is not okay. If you are feeding Billy Bob, you need to attune yourself to Billy Bob, because it could be after you put the spoon near his mouth, he's doing this. Or after you put the spoon in his mouth and his lips close on it, he draws back because it's too hot. Well, if you're sitting here supposedly feeding Billy Bob and you're talking to Mary, it doesn't work. You have to attune yourself to that learner. And it's so important to picking up on those non-conventional communication signals. Behavior is communication. Have I said that enough different ways yet? What we as partners need to do is to organize these behaviors. We need to structure a way for those behaviors to become communicative. We need to structure a way for all the partners who work with a learner to recognize that that little gal in sideline, when she kicks her foot, she means, I need something from you, get over here. And then you can hopefully begin to make a professional guesstimate as to what she needs. And you can do that with non-symbolic signal dictionaries, and I've got a bunch of stuff on those if you're interested. I think for our learners who experience deaf-blindness, communication is a skill, unquestionably. It's also a sensory motor experience for our learners, partly because it takes so much effort, partially because what we need to do to communicate effectively with these learners is to use multiple modes or multiple means or multiple forms, multiple senses. It really is both a skill and a sensory motor experience. And this expands on the last one a little bit. The earliest expression of memories that you are likely to see from a learner with deaf-blindness will very probably incorporate movement aspects of what it is that that learner is remembering. It's also very likely that the way that learner is going to express a memory will also include tactile aspects of the experience. Maybe a learner will take your hand and put it on their ribs to remind you or to try to share a memory of a tickle game, or will move this way when they are not typically a person who demonstrates rocking behavior as self-stim, to say, I went to the park and I was swinging. Again, what it looks like is going to be individual for every learner, but the way they're going to express what they remember of their earliest communication experiences is likely going to incorporate movement and or tactile or touch aspects of whatever it is that they're remembering and they're sharing with you, or reliving on their own, even if they're not intentionally sharing it with you. Labels, oh my goodness, labels we use commonly can be so confusing to learners with deaf-blindness. We can talk about one of my favorite examples. When I went to North Carolina, we were chatting about, what do you call this kind of a drink? And some people said soda, some people said pop, some people said Mountain Dew, a lot of people said Coke. And so when I went in a restaurant, as an example, I said, I ordered a 7-Up, and they said, oh, you want a Coke? And I went, no, I want a 7-Up. And I learned that in the part of North Carolina where I lived, I don't want to offend who's ever on here from North Carolina, whatever a fountain drink was, it was called Coke. No matter what it was called Coke. And I'm like, huh. So I was confused. I went to provide support. This was in a different state for a learner with very challenging multiple disabilities. And I stayed with her team and shadowed them for a whole day and a half. And of all the different related service providers, mom was there for part of the day, teachers, everybody, they called that little girl by 7 different names. She didn't have conventional communication. She had very, very, very non-symbolic, early elementary, if anything, expressive. And they named her 7 different things. And it's like, no. Whereas for me, if somebody calls me Susie, I don't care for that, but I know they're probably talking to me. An example with my son, his name is Christopher. He does not have deaf-blindness. He was a pretty good little boy. And the first day I went to pick him up from his new daycare when he was 2 years old, the teacher, I walked in and he was busy and he didn't happen to see me. And the teacher was, I said, how was your first day, blah, blah. And she said, he's these things were all positive, but she says, he just won't listen. And I'm like, really? I've never heard that about him before. Tell me of the situation so I can help you. And she said, well, she says, I call him and he won't look up. I call him and he won't come. And I said, okay, can you show me? So she did. She said, Chris, will you come here, please? Your mom's here. He didn't even budge because he's never been called Chris in his whole life. And I kind of smiled. I wanted to say, that's not his name, but I didn't say that. I said, would you do an experiment with me? And she said, sure. She's pretty frustrated with me at that point. I said, would you repeat that same exact thing, but call him Christopher? And she went, Christopher, would you come here? Your mom's here. Boom, he looked up and he ran right over. And my kid didn't have disability. He didn't recognize Chris as his name. So these are just a couple of examples with POP, with kids' names. We label things, we shift very flexibly and versatilely. But with kids with deaf-blindness who don't have strong communication skills, we need to settle on labels and stick to them. This is critical. This is critical. For a majority, not every single one, but for a majority of learners who experience deaf-blindness, the way in which they receive information might be very different from the way they express information. One example, a little guy named Lance, with whom I've done a ton of work, he has deaf-blindness. He receives information because his family and his team, some of his team, they sign to him, but he does not sign back. So he receives information not through hearing, but through manual sign, through his vision, but he expresses information with pictures or gestures. So we need to be sensitive that the way kids get information might be totally different from the way they express information. If we have a lot of related service folks. I should have said, if you are an OT or a PT and you don't agree with what I'm saying, stick something in the chat box, because when we finish the reminders, I'm going to ask for your comments in the chat. Proper positioning of a learner's body, especially if they have some motoric or physical involvement, is critical to facilitating communication growth and development. We have to make sure kids' core, their trunk is supported, they've got good head support. Positioning has to be optimal if we are going to help them gain communication skills to the greatest degree they can. We want to maximize the learner's access to all kinds of sensory information. I'm not saying you want to overload and put every kind of visual cue you can and every kind of auditory cue and every kind of tactile cue. I'm not saying that. But the types of cues to which a learner typically responds, we need to maximize those well-chosen cues. We want to teach, we need to teach multiple modes of communication. By that, if you're working with a learner who has more well-developed communication skills, maybe they use a GoTalk, or they use touch chat on an iPad, or they use some voice output device. That won't work in a swimming pool. That won't work in a bathtub. Kids' hearing aid batteries go dead. Their cochlear implant batteries go dead often. We have to have backups. We don't need backups for every single solitary word in that learner's vocabulary, But for the most essential things, you know, I need you to help me. Please come, or hurt, or, you know, I like it, or those, or mom, or whatever those most essential words are. We need alternative ways that will work in all environments. Kids who rely on sign language in totally dark situations, they need an alternative, unless it's tactile sign, okay? This one's colored because it's one of my most important ones. We need to do things with our learners who experience deafblindness, not do things for them. And some people say, well, it's all the same, Susan, and it's not, okay? It's not. And I want you to think about that. The whole point is, if we are going to show social interaction progress, academic progress, kids have to be actively engaged in whatever it is. That's true with all kids, with a disability, without, with deafblindness, with another disability. Active engagement promotes learning. Well, if we are doing things for a learner, like totally dressing her, totally feeding her, totally moving manipulatives in a math lesson, totally completing an art project, that learner's not actively engaged. That learner's a passive participant in the activity. We need to hook them, and we need to do with. We need to provide minimal support. Maybe we need to do 7 of the 8 dressing steps, but then that learner can push that last Velcro strap down. Or we need to at least have the learner help gather all the art supplies, or push the next piece of the science experiment equipment over to their peer partner. Or we need to have some way for a learner to actively engage, do with, not for, and wait. Holy cow, we need to wait. And if we had all the time in the world, I would do a trick that I like to do with my students, where I say, okay, what do you think about that? And I wait for like 25 seconds. And you see the classroom start to buzz and people looking down and getting crazy, because it seems like it's an eternity. And I promise you, 20 seconds is not that long. And for learners with deafblindness, if they, again, depending on the severity of their vision loss, the severity of their hearing loss, they need more time to process. If they also have a cortical vision impairment, central auditory processing disorder, they need more time to process. And if we interrupt them, they have to go back to the beginning. Like if I say, Lance, which one do you want? Lance, which one do you want? Well, as soon as I say that, he goes, okay, Susan said, and I didn't talk to him, but Susan asked me to do something. I guess I could choose. And then if I'm going, Lance, which one do you want? He goes back to the beginning. Well, Susan's talking to me. Susan asked me to do something. She asked me if Lance, which one do you, we got to give him time. And since I'm talking about Lance, I'll tell you his average wait time for response, his delay in response, 23 seconds. 23 seconds. Time it out for yourself. You'll be amazed. Body language is a two-way street. I think we are programmed to watch. I hope today might help program you a little bit more to observe, focus, watch a learner's body language. But hey, guess what, folks? They watch yours too. And if when you go back to my example of feeding Billy Bob, if when you're feeding Billy Bob, you're kind of like, you think that kid doesn't know that? I would bet $1 million, which I don't have, by the way, that learner picks up that something's not right. And it may be if that learner has incredibly high cognitive skill, but just has such a motoric impairment and sensory impairment, he doesn't have a way to communicate yet to you. I saw what you just did to me and you hurt my feelings. They know. And if we act disgusted and we sigh when we're helping pick up a learner to change his pants, or they know. the way we touch them, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but many learners, and especially younger learners, but not only younger learners who experience deaf-blindness, we have our hands on them a lot, right? And parents, you have your hands on your kids a lot, and not in a disrespectful way, but in a helpful way, because they need support, they need assistance, and you need, that's very dictatorial. I would encourage you to just, with your own partner, with one of your children, with something, you know, put your hands on them the way you put your hands on a learner with deaf-blindness, and ask them how it feels. Somebody who can tell you how it feels, because the way we handle kids, if we're frustrated, our muscle tone is different. If when we hold kids on our laps, our muscle tone is different, and they read our muscle tone, even if they don't have words to put to it. They sense our muscle tone just like we use their muscle tone sometimes. Like if you pick up a learner and you feel the learner's body go, that's a cue, right? You go, she's communicating with me. I'm scared. I don't like this. Put me down. What are you doing with me? Where are we going? Again, it could be any of those or a litany of other things. But if you pick up a learner and that learner goes, it tells you something. Well, what I'm trying to suggest to you is when your body tenses up, it tells kids things too. We want to model the use of a learner's communication modes. One of the handouts that I have in the chat, and we'll put it on the screen at the end of today, is we must model the way we're trying to help a learner learn to communicate. If it's gestures, we have to model the gestures. If it's using a voice output device, we have to model the use of that device. If it's sign language, we have to model that sign language. We have to show them. We can't just expect it from them. I believe in my soul that communication is the foundation for literacy skills. There's a lot of literature about this. To me, reading is just communication written down. And that goes back to my basic premise, the true-false question. Communication, that's not the true-false question, it's a multiple choice. Sorry, my bad. Communication, communication, communication. It's the most important thing. And I would caution all of you, I've talked with many parents through the years. My son is 18 years old and he doesn't have a system of communication. Or my child is 22 years old and he doesn't have a system of communication. And I would say, or even with a 6-year-old, and there's like no organized communication. Today affects tomorrow, but it doesn't predict it. And I would encourage you, and this is much more easily said than done, and I appreciate that. If some physician or some social worker or some teacher or some provider is saying, you know, your child is probably not going to walk, and he's probably not going to talk, and he's not going to communicate, or whatever it is, these things that can be devastating to hear when a child is 4 or 5 years old. We don't know. We don't know. We just have to be with the learner and engage with her where she is. I also think we have to be careful to not give false hope and say, oh yeah, she'll walk someday. I'm not saying that, but we have to be honest and say, you know, we don't know. Here's what we're doing. We're trying to work on weight bearing right now. We're trying to work on grip, so maybe she can hold the walker. And you can't predict tomorrow. And really, my example, I got a little ahead of myself. If you're talking with a parent who's of a 17-year-old or a 22-year-old, and they're going, he doesn't have this, it's never too late to start. Because one of the first things with which I began this litany of communication reminders was, I just forgot what I was going to say. One of the first things, I'm sorry, I don't remember. That's really bad. Oh, that every learner's communication skills can be improved or altered. Every single one. It's never too late to start. And nothing is free. Nothing. And by that, I'm saying, like, if you are pouring a glass, if you are working with a learner with deaf-blindness who feeds orally, and you're giving them a drink. It could be if you're a preschool teacher, you're having snack time. If it's a parent at home, you're giving them a drink for a meal. If you're a job coach or you work on a job site and you're helping them have a snack in the break room, and you pour them a whole glass of whatever it is, it's like, don't do that. You've just lost the opportunity for many, many, many communicative interactions. Give them a little bit. Give them just a drink, give them a swallow, and then expect them to either hand you the cup, knock the cup over, throw the cup on the ground, again, to start, I don't care what it is, or to sit there going, or push the cup towards you to say, that wasn't enough, Susan, you idiot, I want some more. And then you give another drink. You don't fill the cup, you give them another drink. And then you wait. And they need to do something to push that cup, hand you the cup, point at the cup, make a noise, something. Point to a picture of a cup, whatever it is for that learner to say, I want some more. Nothing's free. I believe that in my soul.
Susan,
So with that said, Teresa, do you have some questions or comments in the chat? This is the last of the communication reminders.
Susan, this is Kim. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we seem to have lost our captioning, and I just wanted to touch base with the captioner and make sure that there's not a problem with that.
Sure.
Are you hearing us, Brooke?
Yes, and I still see the captions coming through.
Okay, because they seem to be frozen on this end, but if any audience members are using the captions, if yours are frozen, can you please put that in the chat box and let me know? And otherwise, I will assume that they're just frozen on my end and let Teresa ask any questions that have come in. Thank you and sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. I know that was a lot of content, but I really wanted to get through all the reminders, and then Teresa, I'm going to come to you to see if people have comments or questions in the chat.
So this is Teresa in the chat. First off, I want you to know, Kim, that the captioning is frozen for one of our participants as well.
Thank you. This is Kim. Thank you for letting me know that. We'll see what we can do to get that corrected.
And then the next piece I wanted to share with you, Susan, went back a little further into our communication piece, but I did not want to interrupt you.
I'm sorry.
But it's a statement I think it's a statement that has weight, and I want all to have a chance to think about it. As a person with paraplegia, I don't want someone to do anything for me that I can do myself. It's insulting because it indicates a feeling sorry for me and not assuming that I am independent. I get it.
Thank you. Do with, not for. Whoever you are, thank you. You just made my case.
And that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, whoever made that contribution. Kim, would you launch the third poll for me, please? This is about partners, and I kind of want you to think about partners because we're going to talk about partners. No, I lied. No, it is about partners, but it's about partners and the communication reminders. Sorry, I'm a little anxious here. I don't know why. So, given the discussion we've just had about the 18 communication reminders, which of the following are true, or which of the following is true? You may select 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the answers. So which of the following are true that every single interaction partner of a learner with deaf-blindness is encouraged to remember? And not only remember this, but implement it. The first one is expect that the learner is communicating with you. Second, Ensure that the learner is physically positioned properly and well supported. Number 3, do for the learner as much as possible. Number 4, begin to organize a plan for the learner's overt behaviors to become a communication system.
This is Kim, and while people are responding, I will let you know that the captions are working again. Thank you to our captioner for whatever magic you worked to get them up and running. We really appreciate it. And we'll give another 10 seconds for people to put in their answers.
Excellent. Look at these. Look at you people. You are so good. There were 3 correct answers. They are shown in pink, green, and yellow, which is 96%, 87%, 87%. That is fantastic. Yes, we need to expect the learner is communicating. We need to make sure that learner's physically supported and positioned accurately or as properly as possible. And we need to develop a plan to organize the communication. I think the one that got very few answers was reinforced by the comment in the chat, and it could be it was just misread. We don't want to do for the learner. We want to do with the learner to the greatest extent possible. So you guys are rocking it today, and I'm really excited. Thank you, Kim. If you would take that one down, we're going to rock on. So what we're going to talk about now for a few minutes is how we partner or teach a learner. I think that deaf-blindness requires a learner's partners, every partner, family, job-related, school-related, school bus-related, everybody. We have to take time to plan how a learner is going to receive information in every single activity. We have to plan what a learner is going to do in every activity to communicate they understood what they were asked. Let me give you an example of that. Let's say, for example, you've just given a gestural cue or a sign to say, you know, we're going to get up. We're going to get up out of your chair, or it's time to line up, or whatever it is you're going to say. And the learner's sitting in a regular chair or a wheelchair or any kind of a chair, but yet isn't totally independent in mobility. But what you can watch for, as an example, to see if the learner really understood that request about it's time to get up, or it's time to go to music, or we're going to get out of your chair now, is if that learner, and you can't see me, my bottom, but hopefully you can see with what I do, instead of sitting way back in my chair, I could scooch myself up, or I could scooch up and lean forward. It's those kind of what appear to be small things. That's what you're going to watch for me to do, for you to register, check, she got it. Susan understood, I want her to get up, but I can't help her when she's sitting way back in her chair like this. She needs to scoot her bottom forward and lean forward. You got to plan that. And then be sensitive to the environmental context, which we talked a lot about last time. Kids with deaf-blindness often, and often is in italics because we can't say anything applies to every single kid with deaf-blindness, right? We know that. They might have difficulty interacting with things in the environment in a meaningful way. Things meaning functional things at home, like a plate, a cup, a fork, a spoon, a G-tube feeding syringe, toys, the family dog. They may have difficulty in communicating with people in a meaningful way. I think I've sort of beat that one to death by now. They may have difficulty establishing and or maintaining relationships with other people. And that can be broken out to relationships with peers, relationships with adults. They may have difficulty, and probably do have difficulty, generalizing information. They may have trouble with light gazing. They may demonstrate light gazing. They may demonstrate stereotypy. And self-stim stereotypy can be signals of being afraid, being anxious, being confused. They can also signal a lack of sensory input. It's like, I feel so deprived here, I need some stimulation. It may be a call for attention. The stereotypy itself doesn't tell you the function or the motive behind that behavior. And these continue. Learners with deafblindness often demonstrate inconsistent responses to visual stimuli. They may demonstrate inconsistent responses to auditory stimuli. Their perception of the world may be distorted due to the problems they experience with their distant senses. If you'll remember last time, we talked about vision and hearing are two of our three distant senses, where we gather information from, not within 6 to 12 inches of our own bodies. Well, if our hearing and or vision aren't in those normal ranges, we're going to get some distortion more than likely. It's not uncommon for kids with deafblindness to have balance problems, because the receptors that contribute to our balance are in our vestibular system, and there are vestibular receptors in our eyes and in our ears. So if those senses, those sensory organs are impaired, we may have distorted balance. We are very likely to see some delay, maybe short, might be really long. I talked with two parents just last week. One, she has a little girl with deafblindness who started walking just before her 2nd birthday. Talked with another mother last week whose little girl started walking when she was 4.5 years old. It's variable, but there may be a delay in motor development. Kids may show tactile sensitivity. Kids may show an overactive startle. If we come up on them and don't warn them, if you come up behind me and you don't warn me, I startle, and I can hear your footsteps, or I could hear if you call out to me. Lots of kids with deafblindness don't have those benefits. We just need to keep that in our heads and be sensitive to these things. So what? So what does that mean kids need from us? What do they need from us? Well, I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. They need us to help them understand concepts, understand labels through more than one sensory mode. We need a visual cue. We need an auditory cue. Maybe we need a visual cue and a tactile cue. Maybe we need an auditory cue and a movement cue, proprioceptive kinesthetic cue. We need more than one sense giving that learner information. And kids need the opportunity to interact in enhanced contexts. That may be enhanced by an intervener. It may be enhanced by textural or tactile cues that are mounted around a home, or around, at least around the kitchen and a child's bedroom at home, or in the hallways in a school. We have to enhance, and we talked last time about enhancing the context through targeted lighting, but you need to enhance the context, but we can't give you a prescriptive list. Do this, do this, do this, do this, because every learner is different. So when you meet a learner who has deafblindness, some people who haven't had this experience, they get a little freaked out. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I shouldn't, with a person who can't see, I shouldn't say, did you see that? No, we can use those words, see and hear, and let me show you. We don't have to change up our vocabulary if kids have demonstrated the competency to understand either that sign language or that spoken language, okay? treat that learner as you would anybody else, with the same amount of dignity, the same amount of respect. Address her directly. If a learner has an interpreter or an intervener, don't talk to the interpreter. Talk to the kid. The kid's going to look at the interpreter. If a kid has an intervener, don't talk to the intervener. Don't sign to the intervener. Don't give touch cues to the intervener. Use the touch cues, use the object cues, talk to the learner with deaf-blindness, and they'll get the additional information from the intervener. It has to be direct. That's a respect thing. That's a dignity thing. We don't need an intermediary for us to make a connection interpersonally. I think it is absolutely critical that when you approach a learner, I'm talking about this third one, that you let her know you're there, and when you're there and when you leave. I used to have this big bangly watch, and every time I'd wear it, even after it broke, I wore it, because when I would go up to a learner, and most of the learners in these who worked with me in these research projects didn't have organized communication systems, and I would take their hand under hand, and I'd put their hand on my thing and say, Susan. Lance, I'll go back to Lance. He had not seen me one time for 8 years. When he was in high school, I had been in touch with his family. I'm still in touch with his family, but he had not interacted with me for 8 years. I had interacted with him regularly when he was a little guy, and I dug out that bangly watch. And when I went to his high school, I wore it. And when I got permission from his teacher to talk to him, I took his hand, and he was just being himself and not, looking down. And I took his hand and I put it on that bangly watch and said, it's Susan. And the moment his hand hit that watch, he went, because that's how we said hello. We did a high five. And the minute his hand hit that thing, boom, he looked up, his mouth opened, his eyes got wide, even though he can't really see me very well. And he did our greeting. You gotta let him know who you are. You need to have a personal identifier. One of the most brilliant things I've ever seen, and I got to speed up a little bit, is a family. Again, this is not my idea. I wish I could claim it. But the family wanted to kiss their daughter to say, I'm here, I can interact with you. But they're saying, but she doesn't know who's kissing her or who is whom. And they're trying to identify, develop individual identities and individual relationships. So we came up with a plan. Mama kissed her on the tip of her nose. Daddy kissed her on her cheek, and Grandpa kissed her on the top of her forehead. Brilliant. They all kissed her, but she learned over time, when I got a kiss up here, it's Grandpa. When I got a kiss here, it was Dad, because I could feel his beard. When I got a kiss here, it was Mom. Brilliant. If you have a tactile symbol with my bangle bracelet, when I was available to communicate with Lance, I left it with him on his desk or by his desk. But when I was leaving, so that I could no longer see his gestures or he couldn't call me over with his sign or with his pictures, I took it back and I told him we were finished and that I was going. Very, very important that we describe things like that for these kids. When you communicate with a learner who has deaf-blindness, you need to be close in proximity, but you still have to be respectful. You're not going to be like right here in her face. Alert her that a communicative interaction is going to start. Alert her when that interaction is going to end. We'll get to that with routines. And these other things I've talked about. Give her input in more than one mode. Give her a way to express herself in more than one mode. Wait. And allow her to have some choice so that she can gain some control in the interaction. So I would say, Kim, would you launch poll number 4? And Teresa, if you've got anything for me in the chat, would this be a time you could ask me?
Susan, this is Teresa, and there is nothing in the chat.
Okay, then I'll read this 4th poll. Again, this is Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, or Mark 4. Which of the following are recommended strategies that educational teams, including families, should incorporate in an educational program for a learner with deafblindness? Number one, describe things that are about to happen. Extend wait time. Number three, present key concepts in more than one sensory mode. Number four, alert the learner that an interaction is ending.
Susan, this is Kim, and I did a really bad thing when I set up the question. I only allowed one answer, so you're going to have all kinds of confusing results, and my apologies for that.
Well, don't worry about it. Maybe we just need to stop it then, and I can talk about it. How's that?
Okay, will do.
Because okay. Well, there we go. Don't look at the numbers. Don't look at the numbers, the percentage numbers, because honestly, folks, all four of these are correct. All four of them are correct. And so everybody's right. How about that? And when you were forced to make a choice, you know, I love it. I can't honestly tell you that I think presenting key concepts in more than one sensory mode is exceptionally more important than the others, but it's dang important. All of them. Extend wait time, tell them what's going to happen, alert them an interaction is ending, and more than one sensory mode. They're all important. They're all correct. Everybody wins. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that. So, relevant to learning, it's really important to remember that learners who experience deafblindness really generally lack the ability to anticipate things or predict events. They are deprived of a lot of basic extrinsic motivation. They don't demonstrate curiosity about the world because they can't see it well. They can't hear it well. What they do see and hear is distorted, so it's not effective in motivating them the way it is for kids, the world is for kids with typical hearing and typical vision. So they're not generally curious. Kids with deafblindness, unless their losses are mild, typically don't benefit from being left alone, either at home or at school. They don't benefit from being left alone for long periods of time. Sometimes they need to just be left alone to be given a break, right? They fatigue, they get tired. It's like, get away from me and let me recover, let me recoup. But what I'm trying to say with this is they don't benefit from being left alone for the purpose of learning, because they don't explore those toys, they don't explore those materials. They need structure from you to help them learn. They don't benefit, we've talked about this in another webinar, they don't typically benefit from incidental or secondary learning. They have to be directly taught. You need an objective, you need a lesson to teach. This is how you play with this dollhouse. This is how you play with this racetrack. This is how you use your iPad to say, help me. This is how you feed the baby doll. This is how you open your locker. This is how you walk down the hallway to your next classroom. They have to be taught. Kids with deafblindness do not typically independently learn from their mistakes because they don't typically understand the results of their mistakes. They are not correctly able to perceive what went wrong when they made a mistake. Group instruction in a large classroom without some individual support usually isn't the most effective way to help them learn. Again, for the sharpest kids who have well-developed communication systems, they can do that, but even then they need support from somebody to help make sure their assistive technology is working, their AAC device is working, because kids with deafblindness can't learn by watching and listening to other kids. And that's really important that we remember that. Learners with deafblindness almost always, again, we can't say always, I'll never say always, but almost always experience some degree of feeling vulnerable. Kids with deafblindness are typically Again, not everybody all the time, but they're typically more secure. They feel safer when they're seated until they have a lot of experience with mobility and independent mobility and have had instruction in mobility. Kids with deaf-blindness typically take longer periods of time than learners who don't have deaf-blindness to learn to trust other people. I remember when I went to a home with a little 4-year-old named Austin, talked about him in the first webinar. No eyeballs, no hearing. One of the few kids I've ever met, totally blind, totally deaf. It took me 4 days of trying to interact with him for over an hour before I could touch him without him screaming. He didn't trust me. He didn't know me. He's scared to death of me. He didn't want anything to do with me. And now he's one of my buds, but it took a long time. And people with deaf-blindness typically are challenged by counteracting boredom. They perceive time very differently. Most learners with deaf-blindness will respond positively to enhanced textures. Not everybody. Some learners with deaf-blindness have extreme tactile sensitivity, and they really need you, and especially your therapists and your families, to help desensitize them to touch and texture. Many learners with deaf-blindness find it difficult to interpret movement, especially movement of other people. This one I beat on a lot in the second webinar. Most learners with deaf-blindness fatigue more rapidly than their same age peers because they work so hard to see and use what visual skills they have left. They work so hard to use what hearing skills they have left. They work so hard to use the motor skills they have, and they just wear out. And that's when they do need to be left alone. They need a break, okay? And many, many, many learners with deaf-blindness will demonstrate increased tactile sensitivity, particularly around their faces. So just try to remember that as you work with them. So with that, that concludes the general teaching section. Kim, if you would launch the poll, and this is the true-false question. Poll number 5, Kim. For a learner who experiences multiple complex disabilities, including deaf-blindness, the way she receives information might be different than the way she expresses information. And you as teachers and families need to account for that in your instruction. Is that true or is that false? We got a winner. Kim, let's quit while we're ahead. We got 85% and everybody's right. Woohoo, look at that. That is absolutely true. Maybe you all knew that already, but I'm excited anyway because it shows me you know that we have to plan differently for receiving information and expressing information, and communication is what it's all about. And I don't know how I ended up back there. I apologize. And I've lost my mouse. So for the rest of the time we have available, we're going to talk about utilizing routines and how we use routines. And this section is shorter because you're thinking, oh my gosh, she's going to run out of time. Well, it probably will, but it's still shorter. So what is a structured routine as I'm talking about it? A structured routine targets instruction to help organize the world, provides a learner with necessary support, and it's support for learning and support for memory, for developing memory. I would also assert to you that routines help a learner build trust. And as we go through the aspects of routines, I hope you will understand why I think we can say that. I believe, and I think the research supports my statement here, routines really are very foundational. They're very critical to developing a learner's communication systems. So how do we define it? A routine's a series of activities that are related that are organized into a predictable format. All right, and we're going to talk about what kinds of things, but you're going to have a series of activities and you're going to organize them in a predictable sequence, and then you are going to consistently implement them every single time you approach that particular task. Because if they're predictable and you consistently implement those things in the same order, a learner will learn to anticipate. And that's what they have to do. They have to be able to understand the world's predictable. I mean, look at us, look at all of us. I don't know about you, I'll talk about myself, but the world became incredibly unpredictable to me last March when the pandemic hit. Threw me off my game. I'm still out of whack with all the different things we have to do in terms of how we interact. It's not predictable. I can't work effectively. I can't interact with my kid. I can't go out with my friends. I can't do anything the way I'm accustomed to. And the way I used to organize my world and predict my schedule and predict my days, it all blew up on me because I couldn't anticipate what was coming next. How must that be for kids who have different hearing and different vision abilities and maybe have very limited cognitive skill? We know that approximately 92% of learners with deafblindness have an additional impairment, okay? And this is what we do when we as teachers and families go, first you do this, then you do that. We're trying to teach anticipation. So a structured routine needs to have the same number of steps. You're going to implement them in the same order every single time consistently. And if you can, if the family at home uses a series of 7 steps to change a diaper, the team at school needs to use the same 7 steps in the same order to change a diaper at school. If at home the family uses 6 steps to have the learner brush his teeth, then the school team needs to use the same 6 steps to brush his teeth. If at home the family uses the same 5 steps to set the table for a family meal, the team at school needs to find a way to set a table for lunch or set a table for a snack or set out materials for an activity using the same order, and everybody needs to do it the same way every time. Now, life happens. I get it. Sometimes we're going to forget something. Sometimes we're going to be in a rush. Sometimes, you know, even though we might have a routine for how you get in your wheelchair to exit the classroom, well, if there's a fire drill, the routine goes out the window. You grab the kid, you put them in the chair, and you go, right? I get that. But if we strive for 100% consistency, we're going to achieve a much higher percent than if we only strive for 80. So what makes up a routine? All of these things. Oh my goodness. And the reason I quit writing, to tell you the truth, is the slide got full. We're going to have a sequence of experiences. We've talked about that. It's because that sequence denotes time. We do this, and then we do this, and then we do that, and it helps with the passage of time. If you can do them in an authentic, natural context, it is incredibly helpful. Routines help people share focus. You and your child, you and your learner are sharing tactile attention, you're sharing visual attention, and you're taking turns. Routines really demand that we build in reciprocity. I take a turn, you take a turn. I take a turn, you take a turn. Maybe it's the simplest game that most of us played with little toddlers, but it's a classic example of this reciprocity and turn taking. You play that game where you put your hand on the table and then the kid puts their hand, and then you put your other hand, and then the kid puts their other hand, and you just keep doing this hand game. And it's like, what the heck? Why would I ever do that with a kid who can't see it? It's reciprocity. It's I take a turn, you take a turn. I take a turn, you take a turn. I take a turn. That is the foundation for communication development. It is so important So important. I ask you for a drink, you give me a drink. I ask you for a drink, you give me a drink. Whatever it is. Other features of routines, we don't want routines with 22 steps. And the examples I gave you was 4, 5, maybe 6. Why? If we want every team member to remember all the steps and to always do the steps in the same order so that it's predictable and repeated, we can't have 22 steps. We can have 4, 5, maybe 6. Okay? So this is the last part of the routine stuff. And so if we go through this a little bit quickly, I don't think it's going to detract from your getting the key points of the content. This is last for a reason in case I didn't get this far. So I would suggest to you that when you as a team, including the family members, are building routines for a learner with deaf-blindness, you should always plan to include 4 structured components, right? I don't care what the routine is, and I've got a list of possible routines. It could be a dressing routine, a doing the laundry routine, an opening your locker routine, a getting on the bus routine, a getting out of your wheelchair routine. I don't care what it is. Whatever the routine is, it needs these 4 parts. So we're going to go through them. It needs to have a clear signal of initiation. And the signal of initiation is to let the learner know, we're going to start this now. We're going to start getting on the bus. We're going to start the laundry. We're going to start getting in your locker or going to your locker. We're going to start a task together. So some initiation cue. With my example, it was my bangle bracelet. Boom. Hi, Lance, it's Susan. We're going to start working now. Okay? You've got to give an initiation cue. And it's not initiation that the kid has to do something immediately. It's initiation. We together are going to start this activity. Then preparation. What does the learner need to do to be ready? Maybe when I would give Lance the cue, he knew he had to go to a particular part of the classroom and sit in a particular space. Maybe if it's for laundry, maybe the learner has to get the soap and the fabric softener off a shelf, or go and get a laundry basket out of his room and bring it to the laundry room. Whatever it is, it's the assembly of the stuff. There's a real professional word. It's assembly, gathering of the materials the learner needs to engage in the routine. And I would remind you of the communication anecdote that I gave you. Do with, not for. Don't you get all the stuff and prepare all the stuff, please. The learner can prepare at least some of it. Maybe the learner can't get every single material you need for a routine, but the learner can get some of those things. Good enough. Maybe if you need 5 things, you have to get 3, the learner can get 2. Winner. And then over time, maybe you can get 2 and the learner can get 3. You're teaching. That's what we need to do. Then you perform it, all right? That's you do the activity. That's like the duh part. You do the activity and get actively engaging the learner. And then number 4, count 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry. Then you say, oopsie, we have to stop. This routine is finished. And that was one of the questions that you all were answering correctly in one of the polls. You have to give that learner a clear signal. This is done now. We're not going to work on setting the table. We're not going to work on the laundry. We're not going to go down the hallway any further. We're not going to keep brushing your teeth. We're not going to eat anymore. We're not going to watch any more TV. You're not going to play any more video games. This is done, all right? But there has to be a very clear termination signal so the learner knows the activity is over. And I would suggest to you, it's also important that you terminate your availability to the learner when you're walking away, all right? So The key, through incorporating consistent structure, we are creating predictability for the learner. We consistently structure all those different things. We create predictability. And the way we do it is a routine has a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear end. So Teresa, if you would launch that last poll, we'll be good to go. And we are almost done, folks. Yeah, poll number 6, there it is. So which of the following, and choose all that apply. So Teresa has 1 or more, we've got 4. Which of the following accurately describes a structured routine? Number 1, consistent implementation facilitates a learner building trust in his interaction partners. A structured routine should always include the same number of steps that will be implemented in the same order. Consistent implementation of routines helps to organize the learner's world. Structured routines should include reciprocal turn-taking opportunities. This is great. I'm so excited.
Susan, we're at 80%. This is Kim. Shall I go ahead and close the poll?
I think 80% is a great, for 84% now. Yeah, let's shut her down. Look at you. Yes, 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 yes. All 4 are correct, and we're within 5% on 3 of them, and within 10% on all of them. Yes, yes, yes. Routines build trust, same number of steps, same order. It helps organize the learner's world because we take turns and we are reciprocal with our partners. You guys are so good. I hope maybe somebody learned something. You didn't know all this already. Either way, I'm impressed. How about that? So we have 3 more slides and I've got 3 more minutes, so I better talk real fast. Captioner, get ready. Here we go. Routines may be developed for literally anything. I tried to give you some examples as I was talking about the initiation, preparation, termination, home chores, childcare, daily events at school, academic tasks, specific IEP goals. Of course they can. The kinds of skills you want to embed in routines, and by this I mean, please don't develop a routine only about communicating. Please don't develop a routine only about using your vision. Please don't develop a routine only about mobility. Those are too inauthentic, unauthentic, non-authentic. I don't know what the word is. They're not natural, okay? These skills, communication, social skills, sensory skills, mobility skills, using your hands, solving problems, those need to be integrated in your laundry routine. Walk the halls, use your locker, brush your teeth, take a bath, set the table, do your math, do your reading, play on your iPad. These elements need to be integrated as a part of the natural interaction. And so you shouldn't have routines only on these topics. I think something we can do to assist family members to increase their kids' participation in routines at home is ask them. Ask those family members, ask these 19% of the family members in this webinar to rate their child's participation in, like, getting ready for dinner, getting ready for school, getting ready for bed, taking a bath, doing homework, feeding the dog, playing with the siblings, whatever it is. Do they rate their child's participation as exceeding what they'd like, or meeting what they'd like, occasionally meeting it, or just not meeting at all? How satisfied are the families? Ask them. They'll tell you. And then you can help build routines that will help everybody, home and school. We just need to remember that deaf-blindness, a child or an adolescent with deaf-blindness, is not a deaf child who cannot see. It is not a blind child who cannot hear. Deaf-blindness is a unique and complex disability. They're incredibly heterogeneous as a group. You've met one kid with deaf-blindness, good for you. You've met one kid with deaf-blindness, that's all. I appreciate your participation. Here's my contact info. You can email me, you can call me. I'm happy to answer questions. When I asked Teresa if there are any final questions, here's a quote with which I want to leave you. And this is available as a handout as well. Teresa, is there anything in the chat for me, or do we need to shut her down?
This is Kim. Teresa had to leave. We do have one question and one comment, and I will email those to you after the webinar.
Okay. All right, because my clock just turned 3:30, so I guess I need to stop talking. I should have shut up a couple minutes sooner. I'm sorry.
Always good information, Susan. This is Kim again, and I just have a couple of wrap-up remarks, and then we'll let you all go. The evaluation link is in your chat box. Please take a few minutes to fill that out. If you don't have time now, please do it later today. That link will also come to you in a follow-up email from GoToWebinar, which you should receive in about an hour. We don't currently have additional webinars scheduled, but when we do, we will be sure to post those on our websites and also share them through the Montana Transition email list and through our other Montana Deaf Blind Project connections. So be watching for those. The recording from today's webinar will be posted to the Transition and Employment Projects and the Montana Deaf Blind Project websites. The URLs or website addresses for both of those are posted in your chat box, and it can take up to 2 weeks for us to get those available online. We do have to add the captions and make sure that everything is working, but we will have those up within the next couple of weeks. And finally, I would just like to thank all of you for participating today. To our captioning professional, thank you so much, and thank you for whatever you did to unfreeze the screen. Teresa's already gone, but thank you to her for co-moderating, to Ellen for the information she shared, and especially Susan, I would like to thank you for the 3 fabulous webinars and all of the information that you have shared with us.
Well, thank you all. This is great. I'm sorry I didn't manage the time a little better today. I just get too excited and I give too many examples, and somebody needs to say, shut up, Susan, move on. So I'm grateful to all of you participants, your organizers, the captioner. You are all great, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.